Last week, I was having coffee with a former city planner who had spent most of his career trying to get a single light rail line approved in the Midwest. He was remarkably upbeat, leaning across the table to tell me about the latest round of prohibition measures, new bans on foreign solar components, and high-tech infrastructure. He had this look of grim triumph, like he'd finally won a long-fought battle. "We're protecting the soul of our industry," he told me, tapping his pen on the table. "By keeping their tech out, we're forcing our own innovation to step up. It's about sovereignty." To him, the act of signing a piece of paper to block a competitor was the same thing as winning the race. But while he was talking, I noticed him glance nervously at his phone. He was tracking a delivery for a part he needed for his home heating system, a part that had been back-ordered for 3 months because of supply chain complexities. He didn't see the connection. He spent 20 minutes explaining why slow and steady was a democratic virtue, framing our decaying infrastructure as a byproduct of careful deliberation and safety standards. But then I showed him a video I'd saved. It was a clip of the CR-450, a white streak of engineering passing a stationary platform at 450 kilometers per hour. The sound it made wasn't a rattle or a screech. It was a low, predatory hum of compressed air. Then I swiped to a photo of the Linglong one, a compact modular nuclear reactor, not a blueprint, but a physical object made of steel and fission, ready to provide sovereign baseload power. The change in his expression was instantaneous. He didn't look impressed. He looked defensive, almost insulted. He didn't ask how they achieved that speed or how the reactor was cooled. Instead, he immediately started listing the bureaucratic shortcuts they must have taken and the regulatory hurdles that would make such projects illegal in a civilized society. That specific reaction, the shift from pride and sovereignty to a desperate reliance on red tape, was deeply revealing. It made me realize that his satisfaction wasn't about building anything at all. It was a coping mechanism for a civilization that has lost its metabolism. We've reached a point where we believe that if we can just pass enough laws to stop the future from arriving, we can pretend we're still the ones leading the way. But as the gap between the world of prohibition and the world of physical reality widens, you have to wonder, how long can a civilization survive on the power of the veto alone?
Yeah. That silence you just described, that moment at the coffee table, that pivot from, pride and what we can stop to this defensive anger about what others can build.
He was jarring.
That's the heartbeat of this entire deep dive. We're looking at a huge stack of reports here, from engineering schematics, geopolitical analysis, financial reports, and they all of them seem to point to this single unifying diagnosis.
Which is what the sources are calling a civilizational divorce.
Exactly. It's a strong term, I know.
It is. It feels fundamental. When we usually talk about divides, it's, left versus right, maybe urban versus rural. This feels much, much deeper than that.
It's underneath all the politics, I think. Really, it's about physics. It's about a society's relationship with the material world.
Okay.
The divorce, as the sources frame it, is between two completely opposing philosophies of governance. On one side, you have what they're calling the Vitocracy.
The Vitocracy.
And that's the system we're seeing, primarily in the West. It's a model of governance that is defined almost entirely by the power to say no. It's a world where the process, the endless meetings, the 1,000-page impact statements, the lawsuits, that is the product.
So the goal isn't actually build the thing.
The goal is to achieve consensus, which paradoxically almost always leads to total paralysis. Nothing gets built because someone, somewhere, will always say no.
And what's on the other side of this divorce?
On the other side is what the sources call the order of concrete. And this is the model we're seeing emerge, mostly out of East Asia, but not exclusively.
Okay.
In this model, efficiency is treated as the supreme form of justice. State capacity isn't measured by how many community hearings you held. It's measured in raw physical output.
Kilometers of track length.
Exactly. Concrete poured, atoms split. It's tangible.
So the mission for this deep dive is to really explore that. We're going to look at 3 very specific case studies: high-speed rail, then nuclear energy, and finally this geopolitical shift from building things to banning things.
Right. And through that, we want to try and answer that question you posed at the start. Can a civilization really survive on the power of the veto alone?
So let's start with the most, I think, visceral example. The one you could feel in your gut. We're talking about velocity.
Velocity is a civilizational metric. It's like taking the pulse of a society. How fast can you move people, goods, and ideas?
I was watching this video diary. It was of a man named Elias living just outside Birmingham in the UK. And he's just standing on this patch of cleared land.
This was for the HS2 rail line?
Yeah, the high-speed rail. It's supposed to be a station. The project's been stalled, truncated. You know the story. Decades of legal fights, budgets just exploding. And he points his camera at this single rusted fence post and says, "This was meant to be my daughter's connection to a bigger world."
Wow.
The grass is overgrown. All the heavy machinery is gone. Now, contrast that image with the scene from a documentary I saw out of China's Shandong province.
Okay.
There's a young engineer. His name is Lai, and he's part of the test team for the CR450.
The new high-speed train.
The new one.
Yeah.
And as this train just screams past the platform at 450 kilometers an hour, the water in his teacup on the table barely ripples.
The stability is that precise.
The stability is that precise. For Lai, that track isn't just steel and concrete, it's Elias. It's a physical manifestation of the state's will. For Elias, that empty field is just a graveyard, a Vitocracy graveyard.
And that vertigo you're describing, that feeling of watching those two scenes, it's completely justified. You're watching two timelines diverge in real time.
It feels that way.
So let's look at the object itself, the thing that Lee is watching. The CR450 EMU prototype. This isn't just a concept on a screen. It debuted in Beijing. It's a real thing.
And the numbers are they're hard to wrap your head around. A test speed of 450 kilometers per hour.
450. And an operational speed of 400. That's not on a special test track. That's the speed it will run at in daily service.
Just to put that into perspective for everyone listening, the current fastest trains, the CR400 Fuxing class, they run at about 350. So this isn't just a small step up. It's a whole new category of speed.
It is the fastest high-speed train in the world. And what's really fascinating, when you dig into the specs from the Global Times report, it's not just the top speed, it's the efficiency gains.
Okay.
Well, when you're pushing something through the air at that speed, your biggest enemy is air resistance. It increases exponentially. It's a wall of air.
Sure.
Yet they've managed to lower the operational resistance by 22%. They've made it 10% lighter than the last generation. And they've reduced energy consumption and the noise inside the cabin.
So it's leaner, faster, quieter.
It's a leaner, faster, quieter Predator. And what really struck me was the description of the sound you mentioned earlier.
Not a rattle or a screech.
No, a low, predatory hum of compressed air. That one phrase tells you everything about the level of precision engineering involved. Every single vibration has been engineered out of the system.
But the machine, as incredible as it is, it's just the end result, isn't it? The real story is how they even got there.
Exactly. The machine is just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is what the sources call the intergenerational relay.
The intergenerational relay. Break that down.
This project, the CR450, didn't just appear overnight. It's the result of a 20-year, continuous, unbroken line of planning.
20 years.
R&D, deployment, feedback, more R&D. It's a cycle that transcends short-term politics. In the West, our timelines, our big infrastructure projects, they break every 4 to 8 years.
A new administration comes in.
And the priorities change, the funding gets cut, the project withers on the vine. In the model that produced the CR450, the plan outlives the politicians. The engineers who started the research on this train 20 years ago did so with the certainty that the funding, the political will, would still be there 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
And that certainty allows you to solve really, really hard physics problems.
You can't solve those problems if you're worried your lab is going to be shut down next year.
Which brings us, unfortunately, to the other side of the coin, the Western infrastructure paradox. We've seen all these Reddit threads, these YouTube deep dives, just analyzing why projects in the US, the UK seem to just fall apart. And the data on the cost, I mean, it's honestly shocking.
It's an order of magnitude difference. It's not even in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
If you look at the cost to build just one single kilometer of high-speed rail in the U.S.
Just 1 kilometer.
And compare that to Germany or Japan or Spain, the U.S. costs are consistently 2 to 3 times higher, sometimes more.
So the immediate question is why? Is it just wages? That's the argument you always hear. Oh, it's the unions, it's high labor costs. That's the default excuse.
And it's an easy answer, but the data doesn't fully support it. I mean, yes, labor costs are a bigger chunk of the pie in the U.S. They make up, say, 40 to 60% of a project's cost.
Okay.
In a country like France or Japan, labor is maybe 19 to 30%, so it's higher. But, and this is the absolute crucial point, the real aha moment from the analysis, it's not just that the hourly wage is higher.
It's something else.
It's what the source material calls the cost of inconsistency.
The cost of inconsistency. Okay, I need you to unpack that.
Okay, think about it from the contractor's point of view. You're the one building the railway. In a Vitocracy, any project you're working on can be stopped dead in its tracks at any moment.
By a lawsuit.
By a lawsuit, an injunction, a new environmental review, a change in the political winds. So if you're that contractor, you have these massive, incredibly expensive pieces of machinery, tunnel boring machines, for example. These things cost tens of millions of dollars.
And they need specialized crews to operate them.
Highly specialized, highly paid crews. Now, if there's a 50% chance that a judge is going to halt your project for 2, maybe 3 years because of a lawsuit over, and this is a real example, a shadow that the new railway might cast on a community garden.
You're not joking. That's a real lawsuit.
That's a real lawsuit. So if that's the world you operate in, what do? You have to price that risk into your bid.
You charge a risk premium.
A massive one. You're not just charging the government for the work you're doing. You are charging them for the probability that your multi-million-dollar machine and your expert crew are going to be sitting in a field, rusting, doing nothing for years.
So we're literally paying for the inefficiency. We're paying people to wait. We are funding the legal uncertainty of our own system.
We are funding the paralysis. And it gets worse. Because then you have the mentality that underpins it all. The process is the product mindset.
This goes back to the city planner from the intro.
It's his exact worldview. To him, the victory wasn't the light rail line that never got built. The victory was the fact that they followed the procedure perfectly.
They held all the meetings.
They filed all the logs. They completed the 1,000-page environmental impact statement. The physical reality of the train is, in a strange way, secondary to the bureaucratic ritual. If the paperwork is perfect, but the ground is never broken, they still consider it a successful process.
And the end result of all this is what we see in projects like the California high-speed rail.
It's a tragedy of ambition. You look at that initial segment, just from Bakersfield to Merced, it's been dragging on for decades. Decades.
And completion is still, what, in the 2030s?
If they're lucky. And the full line from LA to San Francisco, maybe the 2050s?
Maybe. It's hard to hear that when you compare it to our own history. You think about the Transcontinental Railroad.
In the 1860s, with hand tools and dynamite, they crossed an entire continent in 6 years.
Or the interstate highway system. We used to build. We were a nation of builders. Now it feels like we just debate building. We've replaced the engineer with the litigator.
It really feels like we've forgotten how to move atoms. We've become incredibly good at moving bits around, in the digital world. We're fantastic at moving money around the globe in a nanosecond. But physical atoms, building things in the real world, that's becoming a lost art.
And that inability to move atoms to shape the physical world, it has consequences that go way beyond just longer commute times. It leads us directly into the second major divergence, energy. Because if rail is the circulatory system of a civilization,
then energy is the oxygen, and you can't live without it.
Right. And this is where the sources draw a really stark contrast between what they call energy realism and ritual.
Or, even more bluntly, technical suicide.
I was reading this thread online. It was heartbreaking. It was from a small industrial town in Germany. And the local glassworks, which had been the heart of this community for over a century, it finally went dark.
Because of energy prices.
The narrator, a third-generation glassworker, said the prices became unbreathable. And he described the silence of the furnaces after they shut them down as technical suicide.
And he's not being hyperbolic.
No. You have to understand, these massive glass furnaces, they can't just be turned off and on like a light switch. Once they cool down, the molten glass inside solidifies. It turns to rock. The entire furnace is ruined. It's a permanent death.
We can't just restart it. It's over.
It's over. Now, contrast that story, that feeling of an ending, with the story of a woman named Chen. She's an operator at the Tunjiang nuclear power plant in Hainan province.
Okay.
She was there on the day they lowered the Linglong 1, the world's first commercial, land-based, small modular reactor, into its housing.
Linglong 1.
And the way she described it was so different. She didn't see it as this scary, giant, monolithic thing. She called it a neighborhood battery. Compact, efficient, and just relentlessly reliable.
A neighborhood battery, that's a brilliant framing.
Because to her, energy isn't some abstract political debate. It's the warmth in her home. It's the reason her town's factories are expanding instead of shutting down. And looking at those two lives, the German glassworker, Chen Hainan, I just feel the weight of this term energy realism. While one part of the world is, for very complex reasons, dismantling its industrial backbone in pursuit of certain ideals, another part is just quietly building these modular, dense, tangible sources of power.
It makes you wonder, if a civilization loses its ability to generate its own fire, what does it lose?
Question. The pain in the German workers' story is real, and the environmental anxieties that drive Western policy are real. But the sheer physical output of that Linglong 1, it feels like a much more honest answer to the basic human need for stability and progress.
And that term she used, neighborhood battery, it's such a perfect way to describe the shift in technology here. We are talking about the Linglong 1, which is also called the ACP-100, and the key fact is that this is the world's first land-based commercial SMR small modular reactor to actually begin construction.
Right. And modular is the magic word here, isn't it? This is not one of those gigantic cathedral-like nuclear plants that takes 20 years and tens of billions of dollars to build.
Well, it's designed to be plug and play. It's an integrated miniaturized design. The core components are built in a factory and shipped to the site. And it has what are called passive safety systems.
What does that mean, passive safety?
It means it doesn't rely on external power or human intervention to shut down safely in an emergency. It uses natural forces like gravity and convection. If something goes wrong, it essentially fails safe on its own. It's a fundamental leap in safety design.
And the output, what kind of power are we talking about?
The capacity is around 125,000 kilowatts. It can produce about 1 billion kilowatt hours of electricity a year.
Which powers?
Over 500,000 households. But, and this is the part of the conversation that the West seems to constantly miss, it's not just for powering homes.
Right, you mentioned this before, the industrial heat.
The industrial process heat. This is so critical. Factories like that German glassworks, they don't just need electricity. They need massive amounts of high-quality, consistent heat and steam. Wind turbines and solar panels are great at making electricity, but they are not very good at making industrial-grade steam efficiently.
So the Linglong 1 is designed to be parked right next to an industrial park.
Exactly. It provides the energy for making things. It integrates the electrical grid directly with the factory floor. It powers desalination plants, provides district heating for cities. It's a total energy solution.
And the sources really emphasize that this is a Chinese solution. It's their own independent intellectual property. They're not waiting for anyone else's permission or technology.
Which is absolutely vital for energy sovereignty. But let's get to the economics of it, because this is where the divergence becomes a chasm. The analysis from the JHU hub on the nuclear cost curse in the West is, well, it's devastating.
The numbers were just stark. I had to read them a couple of times.
In the United States, the cost to build new nuclear capacity is hovering around $15 per watt. 15.
And in France, which has historically been the leader in nuclear.
In France, it's maybe over $4 per watt, still high. But in China?
About $2 per watt.
About $2 per watt.
How? I mean, how is that possible? It's 7 times cheaper. The immediate cynical assumption from most people will be, oh, they're cutting corners on safety.
That's the lazy assumption, and it's the wrong one. The sources are very clear on this. It's not about cutting corners. It's about 2 key principles: standardization and strategic indigenization.
Okay, let's take standardization first.
In the West, particularly in the US, almost every single nuclear plant we've ever built is a bespoke, one-of-a-kind unicorn. We change the design for every new site. We pause construction for years because of new regulatory changes that come in mid-build.
So you can't get any economies of scale.
You get the opposite. You get diseconomies of scale. Costs just spiral upwards. In China, they pick a design like the Hualong 1 or the ACP-100, and they build it over and over and over again.
It's the IKEA model versus the custom artisan carpenter model.
That is a perfect analogy. And then you have coordinated policy. They use something called staged indigenization.
Meaning they learn as they go.
Exactly. Learning by doing is built into the system. The first reactor you build might have a lot of imported parts. By the 10th reactor, the domestic supply chain has learned how to make those parts cheaper and better. So the 10th one is significantly cheaper than the first.
Whereas in the US, because of the decades-long pauses between projects,
the 10th one is often more expensive than the first because we've lost all the institutional knowledge. The welders have retired, the factories have closed. We literally forget how to build them.
And all of this ties into that broader philosophy you mentioned, this energy realism.
It does. There's a quote in the source material that just stopped me in my tracks. It says, "Computational power is national power, and the bedrock of computation is electricity."
Wow.
You can't have an AI revolution, you can't have a modern digital economy, you can't power data centers without massive, reliable baseload power.
And the critique laid out in the sources is that the West is actively retreating from energy density. We're shutting down nuclear plants, shutting down coal, and rushing toward low-density, intermittent sources like wind and solar, without a viable plan for the baseload to back them up.
The sources use a very harsh term for it. They call it civilizational self-mutilation.
That is harsh.
It's harsh, but look at the German glassworks. That is deindustrialization in real time. That is a choice. We are choosing what the sources call PPT salvation, PowerPoint presentations, climate targets, international agreements over hard physics.
The ritual over the reality.
We are prioritizing the ritual of environmentalism over the physical reality of energy production. And the thing is, physics doesn't care about your PowerPoint presentation. Physics cares about energy density and reliability. If you dismantle the dense energy sources that power your entire industrial civilization before you have a viable, scalable replacement, you aren't saving the planet, you're just turning off the lights.
So we have this rail divergence, this incredible gap in velocity. And we have this energy divergence, a gap in power. But both of these feel like symptoms of a deeper disease.
They are.
We have to get to the root cause. What is it in the Western system that is causing this paralysis? Why can't we build things anymore?
Okay, so this is where we have to get a little bit theoretical, but it's the key that unlocks everything we've just talked about. We need to look at Francis Fukuyama's framework from his book, Political Order and Political Decay.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Fukuyama argues that a stable modern state rests on three essential pillars. First, you need the state itself, its capacity, its ability to actually exercise power and get things done.
State capacity.
Second, you need the rule of law, a set of rules that are transparent and bind everyone, including the state. And third, you need democratic accountability, which is the government's responsiveness to the will of the people.
Okay, state law and accountability, the three legs of the stool.
Right. But the problem that has emerged in the U.S. and increasingly across the West is a severe imbalance. We have an incredibly strong rule of law and very high democratic accountability, but we have catastrophically weak state capacity.
The school is wobbling.
The stool has fallen over. The system has morphed into what he calls a vitocracy.
Vitocracy. Rule by the veto.
Precisely. It's a system where it is easier to stop things than to do things. A system where small, organized interest groups, and this could be anyone, from a corporate lobby to a local homeowners association to an environmental group, can veto measures that would benefit the broader public good.
And how do they exercise that veto power?
Through what Fukuyama calls judicialization. Instead of having a strong expert bureaucracy that can make a decision and say, we have studied this and we are building this train line because it is a national priority, we've outsourced that authority to the adversarial court system. It's become a government of courts and parties.
And the weapon of choice in that court system is NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act.
The NEPA trap. Now, you have to understand, NEPA started with a noble goal. The intention was to protect the environment, but it has mutated into a monster. We now see these 1,000-page environmental impact statements, these EIS documents, and their purpose is no longer to actually protect a wetland or save a species. Their purpose is to be legally bulletproof.
But they never are.
They never are. The example you mentioned of suing over shadows on a garden, that sounds like a parody, but it's real litigation that ties up projects for years.
Because the goal isn't to protect the garden.
No, the goal is to stop the project. These 1,000-page documents are just scanned for procedural errors. If a lawyer can find one tiny mistake, one box that wasn't ticked on page 742, they can file a lawsuit, get an injunction, and stop a billion-dollar public works project dead in its tracks.
The law becomes a weapon for obstruction, not a tool for building a better future.
It turns the entire society into a giant, elaborate mechanism for saying, stop.
But there's an economic engine driving this too, right? It's not just the lawyers. There's a financial incentive for this kind of stagnation.
Absolutely. This is the second half of the diagnosis. The shift from industrialization to financialization.
This is the MCM versus MM concept from the sources.
Right. Think about it this way. Traditional industrial capitalism is MCM. You start with money, M. You use it to create a commodity, lacy, a factory, a product, a service, and then you sell that commodity for more money. You make money by making and selling things. Finance capitalism is just MM. You start with money, and through complex financial instruments, you turn it into more money. You completely skip the messy, difficult, risky part in the middle. You skip the commodity, you skip building the factory, you skip the risk of the real world.
And this is the rise of the FIRE sector: finance, insurance, and real estate.
The FIRE sector has essentially swallowed the productive economy. Think about where the talent goes. The smartest math and physics graduates, they aren't going into civil engineering to design bridges anymore. They're going to Wall Street to design derivatives. They're moving into what's called rent-seeking.
And rent-seeking isn't creating new wealth, it's just extracting value from assets that already exist.
It's about controlling land or monopoly rights or intellectual property. It's about collecting tolls. And the most damning statistic in the entire analysis is the one on corporate cannibalism.
The stock buybacks.
The fact that over 90% of U.S. corporate income is now spent on stock buybacks and dividends.
Wait, say that number again? It's unbelievable.
Over 90%. So instead of taking their profits and reinvesting them in research and development, in new factories, in better machinery, in higher wages, corporations are using that money to buy back their own stock.
Which inflates the share price.
Which inflates the share price, which boosts the value of executive stock options, but it fundamentally hollows out the productive capacity of the company. It's like eating your own muscle tissue to temporarily feel full.
It's a doom loop.
It is, because financialization raises the cost structure of the entire economy. Healthcare, insurance, education, debt service, everything gets more expensive. This makes domestic industrial production uncompetitive. If you're a manufacturer in the U.S., you are carrying the immense weight of this entire financialized system on your back.
And you're competing against the developmental state model in the East,
where the state actively subsidizes key inputs, keeps infrastructure costs low, and prioritizes production above all else. It's not a fair fight. It's not even the same sport.
Okay, so let's put the pieces together. We have a political system that can't build because of legal paralysis, the Vitocracy, and we have an economic system that doesn't want to build because financial extraction is safer and more profitable, financialization.
That's the trap.
Which brings us to the inevitable geopolitical consequence. If you can't build, if you can't compete, what do?
You ban.
This is the final major shift, the pivot from building to banning.
It's the last resort. It's a defensive crouch.
You can just imagine this tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, let's call him Marcus. He spent years of his life trying to build a business around, say, high-efficiency battery logistics. And he finally finds a supplier with the perfect component, but then overnight, his entire supply chain is just severed by an administrative ban.
He's not being outcompeted, he's being protected.
He's being protected right into obsolescence. And then you picture his counterpart, a project manager in a factory in Shenzhen. And according to one of the anecdotes, this guy doesn't even read the geopolitical news. The only metric on his dashboard is track laid per day. That's his whole world.
One person is watching the physical world get built, the other is watching his world get unbuilt by paperwork.
And looking at those two stories, you see this tragic shift. The West used to be the civilization of the hammer. We were defined by what we could build, the Hoover Dam, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Apollo program. Now it feels like we've become the civilization of the rubber stamp, defined by what we can prohibit.
That's a deeply unsettling thought.
It is. Because these bans on foreign tech, they aren't just trade policy, they are a confession. They are a confession of physical defeat. We're witnessing this move from a world where power was forged in factories to a world where the West tries to maintain power through legal documents.
And that phrase you used, the civilization of the rubber stamp, is just devastatingly accurate. This prohibitionist turn is exactly what happens when you lose the ability to compete on the merits in the physical world.
And it's always framed through the lens of sovereignty. That's the word the planner used. We're banning this to protect our sovereignty.
But you have to ask, what does that sovereignty actually preside over? You ban foreign solar components or telecom equipment from Huawei, it's presented as a victory. But does it magically create a domestic alternative?
Usually no.
Usually the domestic alternative is back-ordered for months, it's twice as expensive, and it's a generation behind in quality. So are you actually stronger? Or are you just more isolated? You become sovereign over a shrinking island of capacity.
One of the sources calls it a paper tiger. A prohibition order can't lay a single meter of rail. It cannot generate a single watt of power. It is, I'm quoting here, governance by lawsuit and blockade.
And the rest of the world is taking notice. This is where you see the divergence in what different powers are exporting. What is the West exporting to the developing world today?
According to the Wilson Center analysis, we're exporting democratic dogma. We're exporting governance workshops, anti-corruption seminars, institutional reform lectures.
We export process.
Right. The story of Somsak, the engineer, in one report really hit this home. He said he spent half his career sitting in Western-funded workshops, learning how to run a transparent public meeting, while the only bridge in his town remained washed out and broken. We teach them how to hold the meeting, but we don't help them build the bridge.
And what is the East exporting?
The order of concrete.
Yeah.
They're exporting high-speed rail, like the new Jakarta-Bandung line in Indonesia. They're exporting nuclear reactors through state-owned giants like Rosatom or CNNC.
And that Wilson Center report had a really chilling point about the build-own-operate model for this reactor.
Right.
Yeah. Russia and China, they don't just sell a developing country a reactor. They finance it, they build it for them, and then they help them operate it. They are capitalizing on these nuclear newcomers who don't have the domestic expertise yet.
And in doing so, they create what the report calls 100-year dependencies.
Think about that timeline. A nuclear plant takes, say, 10 years to build. It operates for 60 to 80 years. And it takes another 20 years to decommission. That is a century-long relationship.
You're locked in.
You are completely locked in. You need their specialized fuel rods, their technicians, their replacement parts. You are geopolitically married to that vendor for 100 years. No amount of foreign aid or governance consulting can compete with that level of stickiness.
And the U.S. response to this, mentioned in the report, is a program called Project Phoenix.
Which is what? More consulting. Feasibility studies. We offer to give advice. We offer to check their homework.
Well, the other side is offering steel and fission.
We simply lack the machinery to compete. We don't have a state-owned enterprise like Rosatom. We have private companies that are, understandably, terrified of the stock market's short-term demands and the immense liability involved. We are not equipped to play this game anymore.
And this all leads to what the sources call the verdict of physical reality, the Jakarta-Bandung moment.
What do they mean by that?
It's the moment the developing nations are having, where they realize that time is a non-renewable resource. They've spent decades listening to Western lectures on process, and they're looking around and seeing that their neighbors who partnered with the East actually have a functioning high-speed train.
So the basis of legitimacy is shifting.
Completely. It used to be that a government's legitimacy came from due process. Did you follow the rules? Did you hold the election? Was the paperwork correct? Now legitimacy is derived from delivered utility. Yep. Did you fix the traffic jams? Did you keep the lights on? Did the goods get to market on time? The government that delivers physical results is seen as the legitimate one.
The intergenerational relay strikes again. A project like the China-Laos Railway literally transforms a landlocked, impoverished nation into a land-linked commercial hub. That projects state power through physical reality, not through ideology.
And that's the bottom line, isn't it? You can debate ideology forever. You can pass laws. You can impose sanctions. But if your competitor is physically reshaping the geography of the planet, connecting markets, and powering new cities, they are winning the argument without having to say a single word.
So where does this leave us? We've gone through the trains, the reactors, the lawyers, the bankers. It feels pretty heavy.
It is heavy, but it's a necessary diagnosis, I think. We have to summarize this great divergence through that Spenglerian lens that was mentioned in some of the more philosophical source material.
The idea from Oswald Spengler that financialization and a society shift towards intangible values is a historical marker of a civilization that is going into the evening.
That's the twilight phase. When a civilization starts to care more about the rules of the game than about the final score, more about the legal maneuvering than the physical output, that's a sign of senescence, of decline.
We went through a period in the 90s where we really believed that history had ended, that the Western model of liberal democracy and financial capitalism was the final, universal form of human government.
But history didn't end.
No, it just went somewhere else. It has returned to the hands of those who can command the physical world, those who can smelt steel and split atoms and move people and goods at 450 kilometers per hour. The world is being reshaped by those who do, not by those who veto.
It is a stark wake-up call, because here we are debating processes, filing lawsuits over shadows on gardens, and celebrating legislative bans as if they were victories in themselves.
Meanwhile, the actual tectonic plates of the global economy are being shifted by concrete and steel and fission.
The ultimate currency, it turns out, is not the vote. And it is certainly not the veto. It is, as one source put it, the bolt, the silent, irrefutable testimony of things that have been built.
Which leaves us with that final, haunting question that you started this whole thing with. Can a system built on stopping things, a system whose greatest strength is the power of the veto, survive in a world where its competitors are busy moving mountains?
The gap between the world of prohibition and the world of physical reality is widening every single day. And that train is moving at 450 kilometers per hour. The only question is, are we even on the platform anymore?
Or are we still in the parking lot reading the safety manual?
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening.